Mike Tyson is 58 years old now. He's been retired from boxing for nearly 20 years. He's rebuilt his life, found peace, and achieved sobriety. But when you ask Mike about his return to boxing after 3 years in prison, the fight that was supposed to announce to the world that Iron Mike was back, he doesn't talk about victory or redemption. He talks about August 19, 95, Peter McNeeley, 89 seconds, and the chaos that showed everyone Mike Tyson would never be the same fighter again. I wasn't the same, Mike has said. Prison changed me. I came back heavier, slower, angrier. I'd lost my speed, my timing, everything that made me great. The McNeeley fight was supposed to be my coronation. Instead, it was a circus. And everyone who really understood boxing could see I was different. The fight lasted 89 seconds before Vinnie Vecchione, McNeeley's manager, jumped into the ring and caused a disqualification. The crowd booed. The media called it a farce. And Mike, despite technically winning, knew the truth. I wasn't ready to come back, Mike has admitted. I'd spent 3 years in prison getting bigger and angrier. I came out at 220 pounds. I used to fight at 215, 217 max. Those extra pounds made me slower. My footwork was gone. My peekaboo style was gone. I was just swinging wild, trying to hurt people. That's not how Cuss trained me. That's not who I was supposed to be. Today, Mike knows that August 19, 95 was the beginning of the end, not the beginning of a comeback. What happens when a fighter loses 3 prime years to prison? What happens when rage replaces discipline? The answer was written in 89 seconds of chaos at the MGM Grand. Before August 19, 1995, before prison, before the return, Mike Tyson was a kid from Brownsville, Brooklyn, who'd been saved by Cuss D'Amato at age 13. Mike had been arrested dozens of times for robbery and assault, heading straight for prison or death on the streets, but Cuss saw potential. He took Mike to Catskill, New York, became his legal guardian, and trained him in the peekaboo style. Cuss had promised Mike he'd be the youngest heavyweight champion in history. On November 22, 1986, at 20 years old, Mike fulfilled that promise. By 1988, Mike had unified all 3 heavyweight titles and destroyed Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. He was 37-0 and seemed unstoppable. But after Cuss died in November 1985, Mike became vulnerable. He married Robin Givens in 1988, a toxic marriage that destroyed him emotionally. He fired Kevin Rooney in December 1988, cutting the last link to Cuss's discipline. And in February 1990, he lost to Buster Douglas in the biggest upset in sports history. The myth of invincibility was dead. After the Douglas loss, Mike won a few fights, but he was never the same. And then came Indianapolis. On July 19, 1991, Mike was accused of raping Desiree Washington in a hotel room. Mike claimed it was consensual. The jury didn't believe him. On February 10, 1992, Mike was convicted on all counts. On March 26, 1992, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison with 3 years to be served. Mike Tyson, at 25 years old, in what should have been the absolute prime of his career, walked into the Indiana Youth Center as inmate number 922335. And the best years of his boxing life were stolen. Mike spent 3 years in the Indiana Youth Center, from March 26, 1992 to March 25, 1995. He was 25 when he went in. He was 28 when he came out. Those are the prime heavyweight years. The years when speed, reflexes, and timing are at their peak, and Mike spent them in a cell. But prison didn't just steal Mike's prime, it changed him. In prison, Mike converted to Islam and became Malik Abdulaziz. He read extensively, philosophy, history, the Quran. He lifted weights obsessively, and he got bigger, much bigger. Mike entered prison at around 215 pounds, his fighting weight. By the time he left, he was pushing 230 pounds. The extra muscle made him look intimidating, but it made him slower, less agile. And the rage that Cuss had taught Mike to channel into disciplined violence now burned without outlet. On March 25, 1995, Mike Tyson walked out of prison. He was 28 years old. Don King was waiting for him with a plan. A massive pay-per-view return fight against an opponent who had no chance. The hype would be enormous. The money would be huge. And Mike, who'd spent 3 years locked away, would prove to the world that he was still the baddest man on the planet. That was the plan. But plans don't always work out the way you think they will. From March to August 1995, Don King orchestrated the biggest comeback in boxing history. Mike Tyson's return was everywhere. Billboards across America showed Mike's face with "He's back." Television commercials aired during prime time. Magazine covers from Sports Illustrated to Time featured Mike. The hype was relentless. Mike's back was the message. The fight was scheduled for August 19, 1995 at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The opponent, Peter McNeeley, a 36-5 heavyweight from Massachusetts with a reputation for being tough but limited. McNeeley was a brawler, but he'd lost to every quality opponent. He was brought in to lose spectacularly. Everyone knew it. The oddsmakers set the line at 25-1 in favor of Mike. Some bookies in Las Vegas wouldn't even take bets because the outcome seemed predetermined. But people didn't care. They wanted to see Mike Tyson fight again. They wanted to see if prison had broken him or made him stronger. The pay-per-view buys were astronomical. 1.52 million buys, a record at the time. The fight generated $96 million in revenue. Don King made a fortune. Mike was supposed to make $25 million. Though after King took his cut and deducted inflated expenses, Mike saw far less. But while the hype was massive, the preparation was suspect. Mike trained at a facility in Ohio. His trainers were loyalists to Don King, not disciples of Customato. They didn't push Mike the way Rooney had. They didn't drill the peekaboo style. They didn't correct his mistakes. They told him what he wanted to hear, that he looked great, that he was ready, that McNeeley had no chance. And Mike, who'd spent 3 years bulking up in prison, was now fighting at 220 pounds. Heavier than he'd ever been, slower, less fluid. The discipline that Cuss had instilled was gone. The peekaboo style that Cuss and Rooney had drilled into him for years was gone. Mike was now fighting flat-footed, planting his feet instead of moving, loading up on power shots instead of using angles and speed, relying on brute force instead of the technical brilliance that had made him great. Those who sparred with Mike in camp noticed he was different. His footwork was heavy. His head movement was minimal. He was just trying to walk opponents down and knock them out with one punch. But nobody said anything, because this was Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson was supposed to be unstoppable. August 19, 1995. MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. The atmosphere was electric. Over 16,000 fans packed the arena. Millions more watched on pay-per-view. This was Mike Tyson's return to boxing after 3 years in prison. When Mike walked to the ring, the crowd erupted. He wore black trunks with no socks, the way he always had. But he looked different, bigger, thicker. His face was harder. His eyes were colder. This wasn't the 20-year-old phenom who destroyed Trevor Berbick. This wasn't the 21-year-old who knocked out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. This was a 29-year-old man who'd spent 3 years in prison and come out heavier, angrier, and fundamentally changed. Peter McNeeley entered the ring looking nervous. He was 26 years old, 6'8", and outweighed at 224 pounds. His record was 36-5, but most of his wins had come against nobodies. He was there to give Mike a warm-up fight, to let Mike knock him out in spectacular fashion and remind the world who Iron Mike was. But McNeeley had one thing going for him. He wasn't afraid, or at least he was pretending not to be. When the opening bell rang, McNeeley did something nobody expected. He charged straight at Mike. The opening bell rang, and immediately, chaos. McNeeley rushed forward, throwing wild punches, trying to swarm Mike. The crowd roared. This was supposed to be a mismatch, but McNeeley was attacking. Mike, heavier and slower than he'd ever been, wasn't moving the way he used to. He planted his feet and threw power shots. Within 31 seconds, Mike landed a hard right hand that dropped McNeeley to the canvas. The crowd exploded. McNeeley got up at the count of 3. Mills Lane gave him a standing 8 count. McNeeley nodded yes. Then McNeeley did the unthinkable. He charged at Mike again, throwing more wild punches. Mike unleashed a combination. At 50 seconds, another hard shot sent McNeeley down for the second time. The crowd was on its feet screaming. McNeeley kept getting up. Mills Lane gave another standing 8 count. And then, at 89 seconds into the first round, something bizarre happened. Vinnie Vecchione McNeeley's manager climbed through the ropes and jumped into the ring while the fight was still going. He grabbed McNeeley and pulled him toward the corner. Mills Lane immediately waved his arms and stopped the fight. Disqualification. Mike Tyson won by disqualification. The crowd's cheers turned to boos. Loud, angry boos. People had paid $50 for pay-per-view. They'd paid hundreds for tickets, and it lasted 89 seconds and ended because a manager jumped in. It was a farce. And Mike, standing in the ring with hands raised, looked confused and frustrated. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In the immediate aftermath, there was chaos and confusion. Why did Vinnie Vecchione jump into the ring? Some said he was protecting McNeeley from serious injury. Others said it was a publicity stunt. McNeeley later claimed he wanted to keep fighting, but his manager made the decision for him. Don King defended the outcome, saying Mike had won and that's all that mattered. But the media wasn't buying it. The headlines the next day were brutal. 89 seconds of farce. Tyson's return ends in circus. Is Mike back? Nobody knows. The fight was supposed to prove Mike was still the baddest man on the planet. Instead, it raised more questions than it answered. And those questions were valid. Mike had looked powerful. He dropped McNeeley twice. But he'd also looked slow, flat-footed, wild. The peekaboo style was gone. The head movement was gone. The speed was gone. Mike was now a one-dimensional power puncher. And for someone who'd spent 3 years in prison bulking up to 220 pounds, that wasn't surprising, but it was alarming, because Mike's greatness had never been just about power. It had been about speed, timing, angles, and defense. And all of that was gone. I wasn't the same fighter, Mike has admitted. Prison took my speed. It took my reflexes. I came back bigger and stronger, but slower. And boxing isn't about being big and strong. It's about being fast and smart. I wasn't either of those things anymore. Mike Tyson is 58 years old now. He's had nearly 30 years to reflect on August 19th, and when the topic of the McNeeley fight comes up, Mike is honest about what it represented. That fight showed everyone I wasn't the same. Mike has said, I won, but it was a joke. 89 seconds. And my manager jumped in the ring. People felt ripped off, and they were right to feel that way. But the bigger issue was me. I looked different. I fought different. I was heavier, slower, wilder. The discipline Kuz taught me was gone, and it was never coming back. Mike went on to fight Frank Bruno in September 1995 and won by stoppage. But the performance was sloppy. Then came the fights that defined the rest of Mike's career. Evander Holyfield in November 1996. Mike lost. The rematch in June 1997. Mike bit Holyfield's ear and was disqualified. Lennox Lewis in 2002. Mike lost badly. Kevin McBride in 2005. Mike quit on his stool. Looking back, Mike knows that prison stole more than just 3 years. Prison took my prime, Mike has said. I was 25 when I went in. I should have been fighting for titles, defending my legacy, building my empire. Instead, I was in a cell. And when I came out at 28, my best years were behind me. I came back heavier, angrier, and broken. The McNeeley fight was supposed to be my triumphant return. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. Today, Mike has made peace with what happened. I can't change the past, he says. Prison happened. The McNeeley fight happened. I wasn't the same fighter after that, but I learned from it. And eventually, I found peace. August 19, 95, MGM Grand, Las Vegas. Mike Tyson's return to boxing after 3 years in prison. 89 seconds. Peter McNeeley knocked down twice. Vinnie Vecchione jumping into the ring. Disqualification. Chaos. That fight didn't just mark Mike's return. It marked the confirmation that the Mike Tyson who destroyed Trevor Berbick and Michael Spinks was gone forever. Prison had taken the prime years, the speed, the timing, the discipline, and what came back was a heavier, slower, angrier version of Mike Tyson who relied on power instead of skill. The McNeeley fight was supposed to announce to the world, Mike's back. Instead, it announced, Mike's different, and not in a good way. The question that haunts Mike's legacy is simple. What would have happened if Mike had never gone to prison? If Mike had stayed free from 1992 to 1995 and fought during his prime years at 25, 26, 27, 28, would Mike have remained dominant? Would he have avoided the Holyfield disaster and the ear bite? We'll never know. But we do know this. On August 19, 1995, Mike Tyson returned to boxing after 3 years in prison. He was heavier, slower, and fundamentally different. The fight lasted 89 seconds and ended in chaos when Peter McNeeley's manager jumped into the ring. And everyone who watched knew the truth. Mike Tyson was back. But the Mike Tyson they remembered was gone forever. Here's the final question. If Mike had never gone to prison and had fought his prime years from 25 to 28, would he be remembered as the greatest heavyweight of all time? The answer is we'll never know. But we do know that 89 seconds of chaos on August 19, 1995, showed the world that prison had stolen more than just Mike's freedom. It had stolen the fighter he was supposed to be.